Nan joined Rotary in 1997 and became club president in 2000 to 2001, and quickly became a DG from 2005 to 6. Rotary International of Great Britain and Ireland was formed as an organization in the 1910s. Nan made history when she took over as the organization's first female president in 2013. There were 53,000 Rotarians in Great Britain and Ireland at the time. Her background is in aviation. She originally worked for a major airline and then set up her own business with a partner to offer aviation security consultancy. In a blog she wrote after being elected as president of RIBI, she spoke of goals and preparation and stated, and I quote, "If you don't prepare, you won't perform well. Flying by the seat of your pants is just not going to allow you to reach the standards you are capable of. Believe in preparation and high standards, and you will be amazing," end of quote. And speaking of amazing, it's my privilege to introduce to you Nan McCreadie.
Thank you, Lynn. Can I first of all bring greetings from the president of my club, which is Twickenham Rotary Club, which for those of you who not very good on geography, it's southwest London, so just outside the centre. Anyway, I bring greetings. When Lynn asked me to do this, she said she wanted me to talk about RIBI, which is a bit of a boring subject really, and also how I got to be president. So what I've done is I've put together some preparation, put together some notes, and first of all, I'm going to give you a brief history of RIBI. Then I'm going to give you a bit about the differences between RIBI and the rest of the world. And then I'm going to talk a bit about becoming the president of RIBI. So, Rotary crossed the pond to the British Isles in 1911. And that's right, I said the British Isles. The first club that was chartered was Dublin. At that time, Ireland was still part of the British Isles. And in fact, the Rotary clubs in Ireland, north and south, still work in one district. Anyway, it all came about because a gentleman by the name of Stuart Morrow, who was Irish, had emigrated to California. But he then came back to Ireland without the knowledge of Evanston. They didn't know what he was doing. I'm not sure he knew what he was doing, but anyway, he set that up because Paul Harris's idea was that the first club outside North America would be London. Unfortunately, Scott Morrow didn't know that. So he set up the club in Dublin in February 1911, and he then travelled to Belfast to set up a club there. And that was, again, was before the London club, because in fact, London was, he then decided, the extension committee at Rotary International, as it was at Rotary, decided that they would contact him and ask him to go out and form more clubs. And they asked him to go to Glasgow, Edinburgh, Liverpool, and Birmingham. The Rotary Club of Manchester had already been formed, so there was no point sending him there. And God knows how, but it was discovered that there was a Rotary Club in Brighton, in the south coast of England. Who knows how they got into it, because nobody knew the history of that one. In fact, not even London knew that one. But Rotary International, Rotary in Chicago, didn't actually find out about these clubs until 1912. As you can imagine, communication in those days was distinctly unlike it is now. And it was slow, very slow, unless people wanted to spend money on telegrams, and that wasn't really considered worthwhile. You know, it was an expenditure. But the clubs in the UK, 7 in total, were affiliated to the International Association of Rotary Clubs. I don't know if you know, but it was an IARC. But in May 1914, these clubs formed the British Association of Rotary Clubs. Now, I'm not sure if it's because they knew there was problems coming with the war, but they formed this association. And Rotary International recognized it at the convention that was held in Houston in 1914. So with the advent of World War I, Rotary clubs in Britain became involved in civic duties to help the war effort. Some of them organized themselves into special constables. Some of them organized Christmas parties for children, and some of them just set out to help military people who were passing through their towns en route to the war to help them get sorted out. Despite the war, Rotary in Great Britain and Ireland continued to grow. But because of the communication problems with the States, because of the war, the British Association of Rotary Clubs, I'll call it BARC because it's easier, had to manage its own affairs. And although it continued to encourage clubs to join or to affiliate to IAR, they became reliant on BARC to be their Rotary resource and governing body. In 1918, at the end of the war, there were 30 Rotary clubs in Britain. Many of the non-UK Rotarians felt that they shouldn't be allowed to have BARC, that they should totally be with Rotary International. However, at the 1921 convention in Edinburgh, delegates decided that when 25 or more clubs existed in one country, they could apply to become an administrative unit. And British and Irish clubs did apply for recognition as a territorial administrative unit. And it was approved by the convention in Los Angeles in 1922. However, the convention in Ostend in 1927 brought that to an end. They said there'd be no more territorial units, leaving Rotary International in Britain and Ireland as the only one. In actual fact, its first name was Rotary International, Association for Great Britain and Ireland. So it's always been an association. To digress slightly, Rotary was a club for men only. In 1916, believe it or not, there was a proposal to open it to women, but it was quietly withdrawn before it progressed. But more and more women, particularly with the war going on, wanted to form their own service clubs. They wanted to do things to help their community. They wanted to do charity work. They wanted to perform civic work, just like their husbands did. This was the source for what we in this country have as inner wheel. I know you don't have inner wheel because you have the Rotarians and what have you, but we have inner wheel. The ladies who wanted to form this were told they could not use the word Rotary, which is fair enough. So that's why they had inner wheel, because the inner wheel was part of the Rotary wheel. Perhaps the more important part of the Rotary wheel, who knows? Anyway, the first formal meeting was held at Heriot's Turkish Baths in Manchester in 1923, because it was the only place that they could have a meeting that wouldn't charge them for the room hire. So good enough reason. And a lady called Margaret Golding, who was the wife of a Manchester Rotarian, was elected as chairwoman. And 10th of January 1924 was their first formal meeting, and that is still Inner Wheel Day. We have an association of Inner Wheel clubs. We also have an international association. I am president of my Inner Wheel club this year. Difficult year, but I'm doing my best. So back to Rotary. So for many years, the issue of RIBI was a thorny one, because the directors of RI were very concerned that other parts of the world would want to have the same units, administer themselves. And obviously, because RI was allowing RIBI to run the place, they didn't want other countries doing the same, because otherwise they'd have no money coming in, or they'd have less money coming in. But believe me, a club in RIBI pays its dues, but it actually, RIBI then transmits it to RI, and it's all sorted out as to how much they've got to pay. All depends on the exchange rate, which isn't very good at the moment. There were more objections in the 1960s. So what happened was that RIBI decided that it would try to accommodate or try to make it easier and less of a problem. And it agreed to adopt all the titles and things that RI had, like district governors, etc. So they went along with that. And at that time, RIBI consisted, these days, RIBI consists of 25 districts. And each district sent its district governor to a thing called the Governing Council. This is something that is a governing council, which has its own president, an elected treasurer, and an elected director as a member. Plus we have a secretary, a general secretary, like John Hugo, who is full-time employed, and also she, and it is a she, which is great, she is responsible for making sure that all the clubs are well looked after. A bit like your Rotary International offices. It's a support unit that supports all the clubs in RIBI. Perhaps the biggest difference is that clubs in RIBI do not have a board. We have a club council. The club council consists of an elected president, an elected treasurer, an elected secretary, and various other members. And they look after the club interests. But we also have district councils, which is something that I think is totally unique to RIBI. And that is comprised of the district governor, an elected secretary, an elected treasurer, and they can be in post for 3 years, and also other committee members, committee leaders. Each club is entitled to have a vote at district council. The idea of district council is it helps the district governor to administer the district, and also to update the clubs on what is going on and how they can improve things. Each club has a vote according to how many members the club has. Also, they have ex officio votes like we have in RI because of past district governors and things like that. But currently, we usually have an RI director on that on our RIBI governing council. In the future, it may not always be the case because we're in 2 zones, but the 2 zones have now been changed, and part of one of the zones is in Europe. So it is possible that I think it's every 8 years, the vote may not be for somebody from the British Isles. So we'll just have to wait and see how that works out. Rotary International in Great Britain and Ireland was often referred to by those not in these islands as RIBI. I heard that said many times in San Diego. Oh, you're from RIBI. No, I'm from RIBI. So some years ago, probably 4 or 5 years ago, our annual business meeting decided that we had to resolve this problem. So instead of being Rotary International in Britain and Ireland, we are Rotary International in Great Britain and Ireland. Therefore, we are known as RGBI. Gets away from the RIBI, thank God. Structure remains the same at the moment, but we are in the process of change. As I say, when I was president, there were 29 districts. There are now 25 because of amalgamations and sort of rearranging of districts. So things do change. But the current structure prior to COVID-19 saw the president of the association presiding over a conference, an annual business meeting, various training sessions, including our own RIBI assembly, like the RI assembly, but for other, not just for the district governors, but for team leaders as well. Also governing council meetings and executive meetings. So there was quite a lot going on. And the president also attended many district events, including conferences. So if I step back from the history and talk about when I got involved, as Lynn told you, I joined in May 1997, and I was district governor in 2005, 2006. Following that, I served on the Constitutions Committee of RIBI, which meant I was visible at conferences and at the annual business meeting. I also served as a Sergeant at Arms in both RIBI and RI. And again, that made me fairly visible. I had also served as a training leader for 2 years, and that's where I met Mary Beth, and I'm very grateful that we hooked up from there. She and I had a conversation in Chicago in 2010. I wonder if you remember this, Mary Beth. She was at Call as a rep, and I was at Call as a Sergeant at Arms. And we went out on the one afternoon we had free, and we went to Barnes and Noble, I think. And I said to her, when are you going to stand for director? And she said, never. When are you going to stand for president of RIBI? And I said, never. Which just goes to show that the four-way test didn't really apply, because we obviously both changed our minds after that. The thing that my conversation with Mary Beth made me think of was, as I was looking at the people who were putting themselves forward for nomination as president, I thought to myself, hang on, I could do this. I've done as much as these guys have, and they were guys, they were all men. I thought, I could do this, I could have a go. So I thought, right, I'll put myself forward for, well, my club put me forward for election, put me forward for nomination. We don't have a nominating committee. We have what they call a selection advisory committee, which looks at all the people who've put themselves forward and comes up with, at that time, what was known as a preferred candidate. It actually meant the person that they thought was most suitable, was most qualified. And I actually got that. I got preferred candidate. And I think perhaps because I was well enough known in RIBI for the jobs I'd done, many clubs felt that they were able to vote for me without feeling threatened. First vote, because we have the single transferable vote. So if you don't get the percentage points in the first vote, they do a transfer of the second count. And I got something like 66%, which is way above what was needed. And I was absolutely thrilled. I was shocked. I was absolutely thrilled. One of the problems I found, apart from all the paperwork and the committee meetings, which are enough to drive anyone around the twist, I'm sure Mary Beth will agree with that when it comes to being on the board or on the foundation. But one of the problems was that the president is expected to attend a number of events, but it was very difficult to attend as many conferences as I wanted to, because a lot of them were held on the same weekend. So it wasn't possible for me to get to all of them. But I have to say that I had a fabulous time. I had a ball. My partner and I got married just before we came to San Diego for the International Assembly, because the incoming RIBI president also attends with their team. So we got married then. The only problem was that despite the fact his nameplate actually said his surname, people kept referring to him as Dennis Phipps. And he didn't like Dennis McCreadie. He didn't like that. His name was Dennis Phipps. And not only that, it was spelled with one N. So when they spelled it with two N's, that was really a problem. But anyway, in our year, we traveled in our car 25,000 miles. Plus, there were lots of miles that district governors drove us around. There were flights, there were other modes of transport, but it was a very tiring, very rewarding, but very tiring job to do. My only regret was that on the morning of the 1st of July, 2014, which was when my term of office was up, my husband started deteriorating because he was quite a lot older than me. So I didn't get to carry out my duties as the immediate past president, but I'm now back in swing and I'm enjoying it, and I'll never be president again. Thank God I'll never be president again. But I had a whale of a time, and I really hope, well, I know I've made an inroads because there have been 3 female presidents of RIBI since I was president. So the glass ceiling has definitely gone, or as a friend of mine said, it wasn't a glass ceiling, Nan, it was a concrete ceiling and you smashed it. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I hope that's given you a bit more understanding of RIBI, if you want to call it that, or RIBI, RGBI, and I think my cat's about to want to get in and out. So thank you very much for listening.